In today's video, we're going to talk about the trail arm, and we're going to talk about exactly what you should be feeling, in my opinion, with this trail arm and the reason why it will completely change your golf swing. And we're going to cite Hogan. Hogan is somebody who talked brilliantly, in my opinion, about how to move your body, how to rotate your body, how to move your arms, and also able to not only do this, but also demonstrate it as well, so obviously brilliantly. Now, the trail arm move. Hogan used to sort of talk about the sort of ball toss analogy, and almost like this sort of term that if he had sort of three arms in the golf swing, it would be beneficial. Okay, and that's just goes again, shows how much he would obviously be thinking about exactly what he's trying to do with this arm. So fundamentally, let's talk a little bit about what the trail arm is effectively doing and how to ensure that you're moving it correctly in the golf swing, and how you can kind of relate it to like a ball tossing feeling. The big thing to understand is that the influence it has on your hands. So if I sort of put my lead hand behind my back here and just sort of take my trail hand to the side of my body, you can see the way it creates this sort of shape in terms of where my hands go. But in the downswing, we're not looking for the hands to come down on the same route. This would be known as having a hand path which is theoretically too wide. If you have a hand path which is too wide, what happens is that you won't have any lag. We need the hands to come down on a slightly narrower path as we come in towards the downswing, and the way that happens is on the upper arm. So in the backswing, my upper arm moves away from my body, and in the downswing, my upper arm starts to move closer to my body. As my upper arm moves closer to my body, this allows my hands to come down, if you like, on a tighter hand path, okay, or a narrower hand path. And as my hands create this sort of shape in the downswing, this is what gives us the capability to create lag. If you're somebody who has no distance, that's because you're pulling your hands down, but your upper arm moves away from your body instead of moving it down towards the side of your body. And this is where very much with Hogan, you'll get that sort of feeling of the ball toss. The idea of sort of throwing and tossing the ball this sort of direction in those pictures, I think is very significant on two fronts, which we're going to talk about. It's very much this type of motion like so. Now, I also recently talked about that I changed my release, I changed my feelings, and I'd also been encouraging other students to do exactly the same thing. And this video is also kind of a continuation on that sort of subject area in terms of this sort of driving mechanism of what your hands are trying to do, particularly in the downswing position. So we would know that in the start of the downswing, you're trying to get this elbow moving down towards the side of your body and ensuring you get this upper arm moving down towards the side of your body. And that's all well and good. But then the question is, well, if you understand that at the start of the downswing, what do you then do with that information to be able to ensure that you keep it going through and you don't end up sort of bailing out and just throwing it down on the back of the golf ball? Well, again, this is why I think this video is really important. One, because of the ball toss analogy, and two, because when I talked about the release. On my video, when I talked about the release, I talked a lot about trying to get the hands moving past the ball, okay, like so. And this is going to give us that feeling of hitting more through the golf ball. And again, if you're interested, you can watch that video in more detail after this one. But again, with the Hogan ball toss analogy, what I think is quite clear with the picture is it wasn't just Hogan sort of demonstrating this type of motion here from a 2D perspective. The target was very much in mind. And you could see the idea that he's trying to throw the ball through towards the target. Now, the reason why it's so important is because if you want your trail arm to continue to move through the ball, you're going to need to trigger rotation. You can see the way my chest and pelvis is facing more towards the target. But what was also brilliant about that sort of picture is the way it was maintaining shape in terms of maintaining posture. So if I was throwing towards the ball here, it's not this type of motion. You can see it's this type of motion. So see the way my trail shoulder drops down, my right elbow drops towards the side of my body, and it's very much this sort of way. Now, all well and good. Question would be, how are you going to do it? Well, I think the key thing to all of this, and this is the big thing going in towards next year, 23, that I'm going to start to document much more, is how you're going to practice. And I tend to see with my students, the ones that progress the best are, should we say, theoretically the bravest ones, or they're the ones that understand the importance of doing enough repetition with the correct movement. And if I sort of elaborate, within golf lessons, I tend to find that it's not too difficult to get somebody to mimic the correct sort of motion, but the way you would have to do it is you would have to get them to look at the target, similar to that analogy of throwing the ball. I would get them to get their head facing the target. The reason why that works so well is because it encourages chest rotation. When you keep your head down, most people can't sort of disassociate the two, and the chest stays still as well. Most golfers don't realise that, so I just enable them to let the head look, and this will trigger more chest rotation quite naturally. Now equally, maybe with a little bit of encouragement with some golfers, some people might move a bit this way, but you'd sort of teach them the correct sort of hip action as well. But eventually they'll learn to stay down within it as well. So see the way I'm like so. So if I face you guys, like this, chest rotation, moving through the ball. The first stage would be just to get used to doing that. Maybe just trail hand only and moving through like this. Then the second thing might be to just do some practice swings where you'll hit the ground. Don't even try and hit the ball. Certainly not to get started with. Just see, are you able, without looking at it, to move like so? And then if you are, then you can start to try and progress to hit some shots. But ultimately, the thing that is stopping you from doing this type of thing is really how you're practicing. And I think that's probably where you might need some support and development going in towards your game next year. You've heard this sort of motion before. Trail arm moves towards the side of the body. Match up the chest rotation. Think more about looking down towards the target. If you're somebody who's not fulfilling it, like I say, I think fundamentally it's how you're practicing. Most people tend to go down the range hitting balls in the same sort of manner that they normally do, hoping that something's going to change. But fundamentally, if you don't ever change your approach towards how you're practicing, then I don't think it will happen. So add an element of bravery. Like I said, allow your head and your chest to start looking at the target. Have a little look at the release video as well. You should find that very beneficial. I'll see you guys again really soon.